This is the Misdirected Mark Podcast, a podcast about gaming, game mastering, and entertaining you, our listeners. We are explicit, you have been warned, and I'd like to thank Mike Willard for letting us use his music on our show. Now let's pick up those mics and get on with this thing.
All right, let's do it.
Let's do this thing.
All right. So, game that we're going to play is going to be set in this dystopian world. Not this dystopian world, but another dystopian world.
Yeah.
This one where magic and disease have decimated society. So it'll be different because there'll be magic.
Yes, it's just like ours.
Disease, not just disease decimating society.
Honestly, I was hoping there'd be a little less magic and more science. I had these images of us exploring ruins and discovering lost tech left over from like a nuclear holocaust.
I was thinking, like, what if there was localized planet hopping? Like, if war-stricken societies inside the system and every planet was different, you could have a different set of cultures and societies on every planet.
Ooh, all right. That's like a little bigger than like I was planning on for kind of like our beer and pretzel game. So let's scale it back a bit, and well, at least we'll just drop like some of the magic rules or something.
That might make it easier. Besides, I got some ideas for how the survivors have been using kit-bashed vehicles as status symbols. Say that 5 times fast.
Bashing vehicles? Well, we could do something like Detroit meets Bartertown. I like it.
Oh boy, this is going to be one heck of a campaign. Anyway, you're all here as well. Cool. Welcome to the 400th episode of the Misdirected Mark Podcast. Tonight, we get into world building. What is it? Why is it? And to raise the stakes, how is it? And after that, we're going to go to the conversation corner to talk about what else is going on. But first, my name is Phil.
My name is Jerry.
And I am, as always, Old Man Logan.
And quick check. How's everybody feeling today? This is now, by the way, like the temperature check if you're going to work. So This is like our temperature check for the show. So like really quick, let me screen everybody how you're doing. I didn't mean to cut you guys off, but
that's all right.
Okay.
Jerry had a long day. I did not.
Yeah, long 2 days, but yeah, it was good.
I saw some pictures of Jerry with face gear and stuff outside and with acids. Fun with acids.
Always fun with acids.
It's
how
always
about
a
you,
good
Bob?
time when Jerry drops acid. I am good. I'm a little tired today. I am probably going to be a vegetable tomorrow because the watch party is tonight. So sleep is going to be later than normal. Just kind of dragging today. But it was a productive day personally. I didn't do much for work, but I was kind of out of focus as far as work goes, but there wasn't a lot going on. So
I myself am like a mixed bag here. I've been wrestling a little depression early in the weekend. I was physically tired up until I started drinking this coffee because and we'll talk about it a little bit more in the conversation corner, but I moved more today than I think I have since lockdown began.
Yeah, there you go.
And I'm just tired, right? Like I was just low energy and tired. So I went and got me some delicious cold brew from Tim Hortons, which I'm enjoying quite a bit. Tim Hortons, by the way, hint, hint. But yeah, so anyway, I'm feeling a little better, feeling a little more charged up and ready to get into tonight. So why don't we, now that we've all passed our temperature screenings, let's jump into one thing, Bob. One thing, which is actually a thing that all of us...
yeah, it's a common thread right now. Yeah. We have started Minecraft Season 5 on the shared server that Schmitty put together for us. And it's been a lot of fun. I have been very much enjoying our collaborative efforts in our little hippie commune. And I just got the word earlier today from Tony that we have power now. So that ought to be interesting to go and see where the power is and how much power it is and all that stuff. Because Tony has a tendency to go big or go home.
Big, yes.
We have power.
We've been running off of like 2 windmills, which was adequate for
Most of our stuff, yeah.
Most of our stuff, but now that we have power, I'll get some big stuff built and going.
Yep.
Do you want to just tell everybody? I mean, people who've seen Minecraft, we talked about being in a shared server. Do you want to talk about what's different this time around?
Yeah. So first of all, let me talk about what we refer to as seasons, right?
Yeah.
So, what we refer to as a season is so we play modded Minecraft, which means that so vanilla Minecraft is like if you just go download Minecraft and play it, that's vanilla Minecraft. But you can mod the game by downloading these additional modifications to the game that add technologies and magic and different items and all sorts of stuff. There's a mod for literally everything.
Yeah.
So what we do is each season we curate a list of mods that we would like to include in the game that do different things or give us different experiences. And Schmitty rolls them up into what's called a mod pack. And we test it for like a week or so. We each take a copy of it and go out and test it to make sure it's good. And then we push it to everybody and we put it on a server. And then we all play in one shared world. Yeah. Now, normally when we do this, we play in one shared world and then we all run off in different directions and kind of just sit and do our own things, occasionally helping each other out. But this time I had asked people if they would like to be in like one big commune where we would each take care of different facets of the game, and everybody was down with it. And so now we have things like we've got Schmitty and Rich working on our like massive storage system called the Seed Vault.
Oh, that's impressive too.
Yeah, it's super impressive, right? Because it's that's what they're doing, right? Like that's their gig. Bob's been building stuff. I've been I've been working on machinery and technology advancements, and Andy's working on Botania as well as like food production. Like we have like enough food now to probably ride out the game. And so and Jerry's been everywhere. Jerry's been harvesting stuff and finding stuff and bringing stuff back, so like materials and things like that. So we've been it's been a lot of fun actually, right, to coordinate all of it. So anyway, so what we do is we just play this until we kind of get like bored of it, like when we've done everything we can do. And when that happens, we get ready to start building another pack and starting another season. So we're all in. Andy's in. Andy Fox is in the chat room tonight. Andy's been playing along with us. Savannah, Rich, Tony, Mike D.
Yep.
Yeah, like it's
a good
great.
time.
Like good. Yeah, it's fun, and we're all on Mumble together, so we're all chatting away.
Where are the windmills?
They're on the roof of the big house.
Oh, they are.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Look up.
Yeah, if you go into the big house and go up to the third floor, there's all kinds of fun stuff up there.
Yeah.
Not yet.
Cool.
There's some fun stuff. I got plans for that room. Like I designed it for expansion.
Mm-hmm.
We're gonna have some cool stuff going on in that room shortly. Anyway,
well, I haven't been back for 2 days, and I came back and there was a piano on the first floor. I think it's wonderful.
Oh, Andy and Savannah have been decorating everything. Yep. So we actually have a patio. You can like go sit on the patio now. Yeah, like we have like all sorts of stuff, but it's kind of fun with everybody just kind of working together.
Mm-hmm.
It lets you kind of play the parts of the game that you really like, and not have to worry about the parts of the game that you don't really like.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really it's a lot of fun in that respect.
Yeah.
So cool. Does anyone else have anything they want to say about because I'm going to skip my one thing. I'm going to push my one thing since we talked about Minecraft down.
And this was my one thing, so all right, we're good.
Yeah, it's totally been fun. I'm like in a nice like I'm in a nice spot right now. I'm still in the early phase of the game where stuff is precious, but I'm no longer fragile.
Yeah.
So it takes a little pressure off the game. It's like, no, I can dish out some punishment, and I'm not afraid if I get caught alone somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting because I have evolved my my fear of the Nether has diminished somewhat. This is the earliest that I've gone into the Nether by myself and wandered around. There was a couple of tense, frustrating moments where I was like, "Oh God, I think I'm gonna die."
I know. I listened to you swearing the whole way through the Nether.
Oh shit!
No, motherfucker. Yes.
But yeah, it's a good time. Modded Minecraft. I recommend it.
Yeah, you were the one who cracked me on it. I played vanilla forever, and you were like, "You got to stop playing vanilla." And I'm like, "No, vanilla's fine." And then I played like my first mod of Minecraft, and I was like, "Holy shit, I'm never going back." Cool. All right, cool. I'm going to save my other one thing. I'm going to throw it into the conversation corner. Quick announcements. I think we just have just the one, which is we are continuing our Star Trek: The Next Generation watch party. We're heading into week 7, starting tonight. This is going to be most of the last third of season 5 and a little bit of season 6. And let me say, tonight's watch party,
Good stuff.
Cause and Effect and The First Duty, 2 episodes that are easily in my top 5, if not like in my top 3. Like they're to me, season 5 is peak Next Generation. Like what comes after it is also good, but this season is just so good. My original projection was we were going to be done with this watch party on 8/4, but I think we may go out one more week. I may break next week into 2 weeks. The list seems a little long. It's like a little too aggressive, where I could just make 2 shorter weeks in there.
Yeah, stretch it out.
Yeah. The other thing I'm currently working on is the DS9 list. That's almost done.
It's a big list.
That is a much bigger list. DS9 will go for many weeks because DS9 is more serialized and it's harder to bounce through episodes because they continue threads through them so well. Anyway, if you are interested in joining us for the end of TNG, or if you're like, I'm all TNG'd up, I'll be in for your DS9 party, check the forums, right? So you don't have to be a patron. Just go to the forums.misdirectedmark.com. Go all the way down to the bottom with the miscellaneous topics. You will see the Star Trek one. It is blowing up.
Yep.
All sorts of people are in there. Jerry's commenting. I'm in there. Jared Rasher, Rob Aberzato.
Yep.
Jim Likes Games was in there the other day.
Yeah.
PK Sullivan. Like, got a lot of, like, we're talking about every episode that we're watching. Yeah. Which is fun, right? Like, it's fun to just talk about, like, our impressions of these episodes. So anyway, just come to the forums to do that. And again, we'll be making more announcements on the start date for DS9, but it'll start either the week after or a week or 2 after the TNG one, because I'm going to strike while the iron's hot. Yeah. Plus, I have a mission, which is when we get to the end of DS9, I will be looking for a night to start running my future Star Trek campaign.
Yeah, baby.
Because that is happening. I am cultivating people. I am teaching Star Trek in order to play the game that I want to play. This is the length I will go to run a Star Trek game.
A slight tangent to the watch party. The CBS All Access is launching the animated series Lower Decks in a couple of weeks.
Interesting.
And
it's
that
a comedy,
looks fun.
Right?
It's a comedy. Yeah. The trailer is fun. It looks like it's going to be a good time.
I don't know how I feel about it. I don't like my Trek funny. I mean, I like parts of Trek funny, but like Trek to me isn't a comedy. But I like that like they're gonna do it as a cartoon, and it's just like kind of broken off from everything else. And I'm like, I'm okay with that, right? I'm not like you can't have this fun.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm just not sure. I'm not sure I'll dig it, but I'm also a big Trek nerd, so I can also laugh at it. So it might actually be fun to.
It's worth giving it a shot. So
yeah.
All right. You know what today is, Phil? This is our return to one of everybody's favorite bumpers.
Oh.
Get yourself a little drink of water.
Let me take a pre-sip.
Yes.
Okay, very good. Okay. Cue me up.
All right.
Workshop, world building. We're going to build a world. We're going to make a campaign full of cool stuff so that you can run around and do cool things because you'll have cool things to interact with. It's the workshop all about world building.
Don't suck. I missed that. Good times.
Very good.
All right. So I want to talk about world building. And I brought the idea up last week. We were chatting after the show because I saw it discussed in a few different online groups. It was something that a lot of people had trouble with deciding what to do and how much. It's something that I've always done as in a role-playing game, and I think that a lot of people do in just about every game that's out there. It's either done by the author, or in the case of published adventurer, it can be done by the creators, or it can be done by you and your group if you're playing a homebrew game. But in a lot of cases, it's done by both. So tonight, we're going to talk about world building by first talking about what it is, and then we're going to talk about tips for how to get the most out of your game. But to get us started, Phil, can you define world building for us?
You know what that means? Everybody's second favorite bumper. I shouldn't say that because some people probably like this one better than the others.
Behold, you are in the presence of Definition Panda.
Yeah, baby.
All right. World building is the act of creating the culture, the history, and trappings of a fictional world.
Oh, God.
So
Stupid.
let me break this down a little, talk about what some of those things are through some other definitions, right? So culture is the custom, the arts, social institutions, and achievements of a particular nation, people, or other social group.
For example, if you're describing the artwork of the Tova notes.
Sure. It can be the history. So the whole series of past events connected with something, right? You know, that's history.
For example, if you're talking about what happened during the incursion at Urgos 5.
Yeah. Trappings. I'm going to expand this a little as well, because one of the things that I am afraid people will miss here is like geography is one of these things as well, right? So, you know, the layout of continents and solar systems, planets, that kind of thing. And then in addition, trappings, which are outward signs, features, or objects associated with a particular situation, role, or thing.
For example, if you talk about how the Ezimos have armor that's surrounded by spikes on their shoulders.
Yeah, so world building is something, like in world building, someone's creating these details from their imagination, right? Like it's coming from somewhere. And Jerry, you touched on a couple of these, right?
Well, first of all, what we see probably the most common in published adventures is you have world building by the author, the designer, or the developer. It's common in most games because it not only gives players and GMs a common place to start, but also shows what the designers had in mind for what they thought a typical world in the game would look like. But sometimes the GM and the players have an idea for something that doesn't fit within the pre-designed game world. Is that phases too?
Yeah, so the next one is like the GM often does a lot of world building. And this happens a lot if you're doing like homebrew settings, right? Where you're taking a game that either doesn't have a default setting, or you're just taking the rules from a game and you're now making your own world and then like populating it, right? Like, so you're building all those things, the geography, the culture, and all of those things, because they have a particular idea of what they want in that world. But there's another group of people that also help with world building.
That's the players. Many games today now include the players in world building. This allows the players and the GM, if there even is one, to put their own twist in the game world. This not only gives players something to hook onto, but it gives the GM something to interpret just what sorts of adventures the players want to encounter. And it's often, when you start giving the players a little bit of world building control, it really starts to make it special for them and takes a little bit of the burden off the GM while also making it fun for everybody.
Absolutely. We're going to talk about that a little more in depth in another segment, but I'm 100% with you. I'm also a huge fan of including players in world building.
Definitely.
We'll talk about it when we get to the roundtable section. It is one of my favorite things, and I will, Bob, hold me to this so that I don't forget this. When we get to the roundtable section, I want to talk about the difference between my my Mutants and Masterminds campaign and our Masks campaign.
Oh yeah,
they are supers games that both had detailed worlds in two very different ways. And it'll be a good discussion. It'll be a good discussion point. I'm afraid I'll get excited and forget about all of that. Anyway, okay.
Well, when it comes down to these details, it's not just who designs the world building, but also when it takes place. For example?
Yeah, so the most common is that that world building occurs before the campaigns run. Now, that could be by any of the people that we mentioned above, right? So the in a published adventure, or in a published setting, obviously the designer like did this before you ran your game. If it is the GM may have like crafted up their homebrew world, right? And they're explaining it to everyone. Or you could be doing it collaboratively, like GM and players building the world in your like session 0, session 1, activities. But that's not the only place that we build worlds, right? Where else?
A lot of worlds get built between the sessions of the game. When you've got a really good game that's running along, some games and campaigns are going to include changes that get made based on what happened in this week's session. If the party goes out and they end up talking to the local goblin chieftain, and he describes what's going on up in the nearby mountains, and somebody playing asks a lot of details, all of a sudden that section of the world might get developed a lot more based on both what the GM wants to do, but also what the players have asked questions on. Yeah. And this is nice because it takes input from the players as facets of the campaign so that it slowly evolves during play, and it often leads to much more detailed encounters that don't feel as stilted, and that's important.
Yeah, I think there's a couple good points in that, right? So the between game thing is, if you're talking about kind of classic prep, right? If you're the between game thing, what's really good is a couple things. One, it's like you said, so we're kind of love lettering the players, right? So the players are telling me they're interested in this spot. I'm now going to add some world detail to the spot and complete that loop, right? So I'm taking what they're excited about, and then I'm delivering it so they'll be excited. They'll be excited about then exploring it. Yeah. The other part is, and this I'm going to draw on from having now just watched 5 seasons of Star Trek, is that the stuff that you do before the game is played, no matter how interesting it is, you build up so much more interesting material during play that when you kind of world build in between, you have the benefit of not only the stuff that you built at the beginning, but now you have like all the stuff that's happened during to pull together into that world building, right? So it really, you get this, like, you get an extra bump in how cool the world building is going to be because you're doing it mid-campaign.
Yeah.
All right, cool. And then lastly, the other place where world building can occur, and one of my favorite places where world building can occur, is just during the game. I am a huge fan, as the ad lib part of my GMing, I tend to make up world stuff on the fly constantly. And I also then will pull players into making it up as well, so that we're, basically fleshing out the world as we proceed through the game.
That's one of my favorites too.
Yeah.
What's one of the best tools for that, or is our old favorite, leading questions?
Oh, without a doubt, right? Leading questions are a fantastic way to build upon those. And I know we've, I can't remember if we've done it here. We've certainly done it on Pandas, where we've gone into a whole thing on leading questions. But yes, I totally agree. Leading questions are a fantastic way to do world building. And I'm a huge fan. Cool. All right. So that is what world building is, right? We talked about like what goes into it, who does it, when you do it, right?
The next thing is, why bother? And I realize that there's a lot of purposes for why we do world building itself.
Right. And, this is our normal shtick, right? Like we talk about what it is, but really, why bother is really the $1,000 question here.
It is. And it's because this is what's going to create that imaginary world that we're all playing in. And we need that world and the things that are in it to help us create a shared imaginary space.
Yep, I'm gonna break in for one more definition that we didn't put up at the top, which was shared imaginary space is a phrase that we've used here on the show, and it is the group's understanding of the world that the game takes place in, and it's required because that's how each player's actions and descriptions make sense to each other, right? And we know this because if we're not in the same shared imaginary space, for instance, your players may miss that there was a staircase in a room, then what happens is the players start doing things that don't make sense to the GM, right? Because the GM's processing one set of information, the players are processing another, or a player comes out of sync or whatever. So shared imaginary space is actually a really important concept that we at all times need to maintain in a game. And right, world building is the thing that lets us help imagine the world. Okay, back, I'm out.
No, it is important to define that, because I played the game years ago where a first-time GM decided to run a fantasy game based in the world of Final Fantasy, which was wonderful, except that only 2 of her 6 players had ever played Final Fantasy.
Right, and now...
including me. And so we're trying to play a hardcore D&D game, and she's talking about a chocobo shows up, but we have no idea what it is, because there wasn't that group dynamic and a shared imaginary space. Half the party was imagining the world very differently than the GM and the other 2 players. So it's good to do that kind of thing. So,
Agreed.
And this is what I'm saying, is that we need to have this element, because we don't need a ton of it, but it is necessary. And it's going to depend a little bit on the scope of the game. If you're playing a beer and pretzels game for one session, you don't need a ton of world building. If you're going to be doing a 3-year campaign, you're going to need some idea of what's going to be out there. But again, you don't need a ton of it, but you need enough to get the players in the right direction and sustain them for more than 1 week. So, now, beyond the basic need for world building, there are other things that world building does for the game itself.
Yeah. So there's a bunch of these. The first one is it's a creative exercise, right? World building is just straight up imagining shit, and as such, it helps. It always helps us sharpen our creative processes.
It also helps to facilitate the backstories, where the characters are. The players are going to use these elements of the world in their backstories to make them richer, or develop some of these elements in their backstory itself.
Yeah, exactly. Which hand in hand with that, it also facilitates connections, bonds, relationships, right? So as players are either using pieces that have been built or building pieces to show how their characters are connected. And that, as we know, bonding characters and relationships and stuff is, another thing that we all love in games. So yeah, that's also important.
And I think all this together leads to the emotional investment. We've talked a lot over the last couple of months about how important emotional investment is in a game. And when you do a world building collaboratively, or you have things the players can hook on, world building can create that emotional investment right off the bat. Because I think we've all been in games where it takes a couple of weeks for us to really get hooked on whatever the GM has done, especially if they've created a very rigid world to start with. When you do it collaboratively, world building, even if it's just a couple of questions the GM asks, can give all the players a chance to invest right off the bat in the game itself. So
yeah, I totally agree, right? An emotional investment, I think, is one. I don't think you can ever have too much emotional investment in a game, or too many opportunities to invest in a game. And so, world building is such a great way to have people be able to put parts of themselves into the game, and then have that connection to it, which I totally dig. And again, if you want, when we talk about emotional investment, right, when we're talking about a campaign, the reason why emotional investment is really important is that when a campaign gets disrupted, scheduling, pandemic, work, whatever, if you don't have a high level of emotional investment, it's pretty easy to let a campaign just fall off, right? If you're like about your game, or if your players are about the game they're playing, and there's a reasonable disruption, like the game sometimes just dies on the vine. But if you have a lot of emotional investment, like players will walk through fire to get to the next session, right? Doesn't matter if it's delayed, doesn't matter if somebody has to take a couple of weeks off from work. When people are invested, they're like, don't worry, when everybody's back, we're playing again, right? Like we're ready, we'll be at the table. And that is what gets you those really good sustained campaigns, is that deep emotional investment. So I just want to note like that. I don't want to underplay the importance of that. It's a huge thing. All right. So having now talked about why it's important, like what goes into world building, right? it's literally impossible to list out everything that could be covered in world building. So I thought we'd just kind of run through a list of some of the major things like you would expect to do in world building.
The first is you're going to want to have some sort of geography, what the landscape looks like, where things are going on. You're also going to have some political structures in mind. What's going on? Who's in charge? Are they the good guys or the bad guys or both? Who are the players going to have to deal with as far as laws and rules? On top of that, you get your social structures. What are the family elements? What is expected? Are there guilds? Are there space police? What's involved? If you're going to have religions, what are they and what influence do they have in the game? A little bit of history, enough that the players can hook on what has happened in the past. And as my history professor used to say, and why do we care about it now? and also toss in some cultural elements, customs, art, music, special kinds of foods, that sort of thing. And that'll help to give you a little bit of a basis. But there's more to it than that.
Yeah, so other things that you could put into your world building. Now, again, none of these are requirements, right? These are all these are all optional. Festivals is a thing that you could have in your world building. That is a Andy Fox favorite, right? To have festivals. Species and other creatures would be things that would be in your world. Items and equipment. Weather, right? Like, what kinds of weather is there in this world? What kind of food? That's one that's often overlooked. And what kind of science? Is there magic? All of those things, right? So when you're creating your world, you just pull from what you need, right? From that list, plus all the other things that we didn't mention. And so often, yes, Joe.
I'll jump in here real quick. Before we go on to the next part of the topic, when you've got these things, you're trying to build a world from scratch. Sometimes as a GM or something, you might not have all of these decided ahead of time.
Absolutely.
I'm going to talk a little bit later about a product that TSR put out years ago that taught me a little bit about this. But one of the things you can do is just take what you've got and build up from there. If you know that you have an adventure that's going to take place in a town, and you only have that town and a couple people in town, that's all you need for your background initially. Don't get overwhelmed by having to create everything. Start with what you've got and move up and down the scale. We'll talk about building later on. I just want to say that we've listed all these things. Sometimes as a new GM even a new player, you might need to just start with just a little bit you've got and then work your way up.
Yeah, I'll talk about. We'll talk about it in the next segment too. I'll talk about the kind of zoom out idea of
Thank you. That's
building.
That's what I was looking at.
Yeah. I like that a lot actually, and it's a thing I do as well, right? I do what I would refer to often as zoom out world building. Okay, so when we are world building, right? What we wind up doing is we wind up from this list. We're going to take some stuff, and we're going to make some unique things from it, right? So maybe we want to have a particular religion, a particular type of festival, something like that. So we're going to make some unique pieces, and then we often, and we see this in other media as well, right? We just default to our world for things that we don't want to make unique.
Yeah, like you might decide to describe the unique shape of the island, but you're going to default to the fact that it has mountains, just like the mountains in central New York, and a forest like there is like the big forests of the Northwest and that sort of thing. You're basically using things that people can refer back to very easily.
Yes. So we just, again, we'll build unique and we fill in with default. But, and so when we're doing it with things like geography, right, that's pretty safe, right? If I'm like, okay, this continent is cold like the Nordic regions of Europe, and I'm just going to default to, long days in the summer, long nights in the winter, cold and snowy, temperate in the summer, that kind of thing. There's not really any problem, right? Like that's fine. Where we run into some trouble, and I see a note here from Bob that we need to tread carefully as we move through this next section, so I'm going to slow down a little. And Bob, you feel free to jump in case we miss the mark.
Yeah.
Okay. Where we need to be careful is when we start defaulting in places where we're pulling cultural elements as defaults. Because when we do that, we're often doing that from our comfort zone, which would then be our default culture, which means that we're inserting elements of our culture into the game with the chance that we're inserting problems with our cultures from our own culture into the world, and maybe doing it without even thinking about it, right? Like it could be completely unintentional, but we wind up defaulting to it because again, it's a default, right? We're just like, we made some unique things, and then we were like, cool, I'm just gonna like toss in some other stuff from my world, right? From the media I've consumed, whatever, my culture, whatever, into this. So
example, you have something
go
like,
slow.
Yeah, no, I've got this. For example, if you have a world that has farms, default, you might think that it's a good idea. We'll just go with what we've done, in our own culture, and have the men work in the fields and the women work back at the house. That's, setting up a whole bunch of roles and a whole bunch of preconceived notions that might not be good for your game. Just because it's the culture that we have had here doesn't mean it's going to be comfortable and good for everybody else in the game. And so maybe this is the time to take some of those gender roles or cultural roles and smooth them out and even them out so that they're not just stereotypes, and so that they're not immediately putting people or characters into a situation that can be problematic or just might be uncomfortable for your players.
I'll give you an example from some stuff that I had world built a long time ago. For a long time, I had wanted to, early in the Encoded years, I had wanted to I wanted to put my fantasy world of El Hall out as a product. And I'm in the long run, I'm kind of glad we never really did, because at the time, I don't think I was savvy enough to catch all the problems that I think are kind of lying in that world.
Yeah.
And I think, if I went and did it now, I think I could do a better job of it. But one of the things I do remember is that, and I specifically bring up this thing about farming, was I was very conscious that I wanted more gender equality in the fantasy world in general. And I was like, okay, well, who works the fields, who doesn't work the fields? And I actually did it by age, right? So the default for one of the cultures was that multi-generations lived in the same house. So grandparents, parents, grandkids, that kind of thing. And if you were young and able, you worked the fields, right? Gender didn't matter. And if you were older, you tended the house, right? And took care of like watching the kids and all of that stuff. And then when the kids were old enough, then they were able to go out to the fields. But my point of this is that, going back to the defaults, right? We have tons of things baked into us culturally that are potentially problematic. And if we're not paying attention is when we can accidentally inject some of these into a game. And we could, depending on where we're taking it, right? So it could be our home group, it could be a convention game or something. We could potentially make somebody else uncomfortable.
Yeah.
By doing something that could be completely unintentional, but it just happens to be that like this default thing that we took, like we dragged in with us. So I guess the point of that is kind of like analyze your biases, look at those things before.
Without doing some kind of in-depth review on what your default positions are, you're basically opening the door for all of the flaws that are inherent in those default positions to come along with all the good stuff.
Yes.
So you don't just want to blindly be like, it's just like X. Because if X has problems, you just opened up a can of worms.
If X is the weather patterns of a particular part of the world, help yourself.
You're
right?
not really going to cause too much trouble if like, it's a Nordic region. They have fjords. You're not really going to have too many players jumping up and going, I'm offended by fjords.
Cameron better have fjords. So.
Yeah. So
I tend to pine for the fjords, but
of course.
So there is a place where we have to be more careful. And there are places where we can kind of we can relax about those those shortcuts, weather is another one, right? Like,
Yeah.
you know, we don't have to make up unique weather,
No.
right? If I say it's raining, people are like, cool, it's raining.
If you want to make up some interesting, unique weather, like a
Yeah,
blood
yeah.
mist,
Yes, yeah. If you want to make up something like
for
that,
it,
like
you know?
totally make that up.
Yeah.
But again, same thing when it comes to like food's another one where it's kind of easy to default.
Yeah.
Although I guess we'll talk about it a little bit later. But if you default to 99% of all the same food and make one or two unique foods, it'll feel unique, right? Like it'll feel that piece of world building will be unique. Anyway, okay. So having now carefully traversed that, right? And having talked about, checking those things as you're putting them into your world. Again, just because something works like that in our world doesn't necessarily mean it needs to go into another world. Okay. Jared, you want to take this and bring us out to the...
Yep. The last couple of things you can look at is that world building in the game. Another reason to do it is it could be a love letter between the players and the GMs. If the players start adding things as part of their character's culture and the GM is paying attention to it, all of a sudden that can become settings or even plot hooks by the GM for the entire game. If you've got a Dragonborn and your character's background, you walk into town, you make some comment about, I'm just going to look for some sweet leaf oil because that's what I have to put on my scales to keep them shiny and soft. The GM can later on hook into that and have a vendor selling oil, or an adventure where the players have to go out and get some more, or even going into a Dragonborn encampment where the different fragrances are important. That's all love lettering back to the players. At the same time, when the GM establishes something that's important and the players jump on those role-playing hooks and run with them, it becomes really important also. So the GM starts talking about how the gnomes of the area really enjoy playing tricks on people. And the players decide to run with that as a hook. And every time they encounter a gnome, they try to ask them, what's your newest trick? What have you done? That sort of thing. That's a love letter back to the GM, telling them, something that they established as just part of the background is really important to them. And it keeps building that emotional investment, but it's also back and forth, making it feel like when the players add those in and the GM does something, as a player, you're like, wow, that was really important. And now something I did is now part of the game. When the players pay attention to that sort of thing in the campaign world and do it for the GM, as GMs, we all feel like, wow, I did something right this week, and gets you a little bit further away from that imposter syndrome. And it all works very well. So world building can be a great tool for the game and a great tool for friendships. So, all right. Anyway, that's our overview of what world building is. Misdirected Mark, word scramble. And we're going to take a break now and check with the chat room and see what they're up to. But first, Bob's going to tell us about another show on the Misdirected Mark Network.
Yes, absolutely. She's a Super Geek is an Emmy-nominated actual play RPG podcast highlighting women as GMs. Join them every other Tuesday for lots of different RPGs and guests. All right. In the chat room, we had a wonderful question from Ange. Let me pull that back up here. If you're trying to do collaborative world building, how do you, as the GM, handle when a player really wants to introduce an element that you're not interested in exploring? You may not have any moral objection to it, but it's not anything that you can bring any excitement to.
So, right. So the easy one, right, is like if it's totally offensive, like, cool, you can X card that straight out, right?
Yeah.
Like you can just be like, nope.
Yeah.
So now we're talking about collaboration, right? Because this is, this is, the classic, how do we collaborate, like to make something, right? How do we incorporate everybody's ideas without people feeling pushed out, et cetera? So one part of it is, and I like this, if you've ever played Microscope's a fantastic game of collaborative history building. One of the things Microscope does is before you even start building anything, you get to declare, I can't remember if it's more than one or if it's just one or it's as many as you want, I forget, but you get to declare things that you just don't want in the game. Right. So you could be like, cool, we're going to do this history, no aliens, right? Like I'm not like, or no Cthulhu mythos, right? Like whatever else you want, cults, whatever, But, you know, I don't want another game about, you know, Azathoth, whatever, right? Like that kind of thing. And so everybody gets to declare those. So what that winds up doing is that's boundary building, right? So what we basically do is we ask everybody almost in a lines and veils kind of way, what don't you want in the game, right? And then we can do the reverse of that, right? Because we can also then ask people if we wanted to up front, like, you know, are there some things that you very much want to be pulled into the game, right? We could throw those in the center of the table as well. I don't think Microsoft, I don't think Microscope does that, but it could, right? Like you could put your most wants in with the things you don't want. So the first part of it is, if you've got some serious objections to certain parts of like certain tropes or things like that for a game, declaring them before anyone builds anything is a great way to avoid the problem. So if I say no mythos and Jerry wants cultists, we'll come up with another way to make up, you know, to fit cultists into the game.
The real thing that you have to look at though is when they bring something up, and if it's just something you're not excited about, that's when you need to ask them some questions. What about excites them? What is it they're looking for out of it? And this is also a good time to do some reskinning. You know, we get that from time to time when somebody wants to bring in a culture that doesn't quite exist in the game. I think a great example of this is Keith Baker had an article about this when he wrote Eberron. I don't know where he talked about it. And it was a reference to the fact that in Eberron, there are no samurai. But somebody wanted to have, you know, I want to play a samurai. And how do you build that in? And he said, think about it this way. And this is one way of looking at it, is something along the lines of, you know, it's a culture that's all about honor and military might and strength and obeying those who are of higher station, and family and clan being very important. Just take what they like about all that samurai stuff and incorporate that into dwarven culture. Because dwarves...
the houses.
Yeah, dwarves are really all about strength and military might and culture and all that. Now, find out what else you want to do with it. But you can find out what they like. If it's something that you're not interested in, find out what they're willing to take as a compromise. What would they be willing to accept as a reskin, and work it from there. And you know, and it might be something simple like, you know, they might like, well, you know, I want to have laser guns in my D&D. Well, we're just not going to do that. Yeah. But I'll tell you what, we'll figure out a way to get you a magic wand.
Yes. Okay.
You know?
So reskinning is a great way, right? That's a way of, hey, I see you like this thing. It doesn't quite fit into the world. Can we shape it to fit in nicely? Yeah. The other one I will say, and this may be the less popular answer. So there's two. I will give two less popular answers. So one of which is you could be honest, right? So you can be honest and simply be like, I get that excites you, Bob. I'm not sure I'm going to be excited about using it in the game. Is like, what can we do with that? Like, can we, you know, and then we can do a yes and, right? So like, yes, you can have ninjas, and what can we do about them? Like to get us there, right? So we can just be honest about it. The other one, which I will consider a less popular answer, is sometimes in collaboration, you just do the thing for the other person for no gain. So if somebody wants, as part of the game, some sort of guild, then, and it's not a guild you're excited about, then you write an adventure about that guild, you close the loop, and then you don't have to come back to it. Right. Like and I do this a lot. Like in my day job, collaboration is a huge part of my job. And often if I'm doing something like with a client and my you know, own company, like sometimes we can get the win-win, and sometimes we get the, you're going to give this piece, I'm going to give this piece, right? And nobody's thrilled, but nobody hates it, right? Like, and so sometimes you just give the player the thing they want, right? Like,
I would call that a project management fail forward.
Yeah.
It's I don't know.
Things progress, but neither side really won.
Yeah, I mean it's tough because it's tough, right? Because you ideally always want the win-win, and the win-win is not always achievable, but sometimes you just, sometimes the middle ground is okay. So those are my two unpopular answers, which is be honest and just tell the player you're not feeling it. And the other one is just do it. Like, and again, I say that as long as safety, moral objections or anything, like, obviously, if you have any of those problems, you hit the X card, you're like, nope, not in this game. And that's okay.
Yeah, but that's not really what she was talking about, though. She was talking about, what if you don't have any moral objection to it? What if you're just...
Yeah, like, I want light cycles in this game.
Yeah.
And you're like, all right.
Yeah. She added a corollary, too, and that was, don't agree to put something in the game that you know you're just going to ignore as a GM. If you just like, yeah, okay, we can do that, and then you just totally leave it out.
Then take the other approach and tell them you're not feeling it, right? Like it'll suck in the moment, but that incomplete loop, right? Our brains know loops, right? We've talked about this before, right? Our brains know this loop structure. So if somebody puts an element out there in the campaign world and is expecting it to show up at some point, and you never put it in there, then they are eternally waiting for it. And it creates this kind of itchy feeling, which in a long enough campaign will come out as some sort of passive aggressive behavior.
Yeah, it's just going to cause trouble.
Yeah.
Right?
So we've seen that. I had when I ran Star Wars, one of the things that happens in the Edge of the Empire game is that you can roll advantages. You can have something where you succeed, but also get some advantages you can bank. And we had a player that every time they rolled a single advantage or multiples, was always like, and then a Rancor shows up. No, a Rancor doesn't show up in the middle of it. And it got to the point where he really wanted to have a Rancor show up. I really had no interest, but eventually I put them in a place where, all right, you're in the forest. I'm waiting for him to finally, and then a Rancor shows up. Yes, one does,
Yeah.
And I didn't make it be difficult for them. I don't think what you said, though, about giving in or just kind of letting them know what's going on is necessarily either unpopular or a bad option. Because
I don't.
Because you said it's unpopular. I don't know how unpopular that is. I see a lot of GMs doing it. I don't think it's a bad. I'm not saying that you're. I think that you're putting more of a negative spin on it than it is. I think those are both perfectly good answers to that question.
Yeah, I guess my point is, right, like a lot of times when we talk about GMing advice, right, we're often looking for these kind of like either looking to give or looking to hear these kind of cool techniques of like how you kind of like do these things and your players never realize like what you've done, right? Like these machinations or whatever. And sometimes we have a bunch of those. And sometimes it's just a matter of being like, I'm not into light cycles.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Like suggest something else. I'm just not feeling this one. Yeah. Right. And maybe I shouldn't have said unpopular. Maybe I'll say the unsexy. Right, like it's not the sexy cool GMing advice. It falls under the communicate bucket, which and truthfully
that is the key right there, the communicate thing. Because ultimately, when you break it down, if you have a conversation with the player about what it is that they're asking for, if you're not feeling the samurai thing, and you get I want the code and the like, so it's not really a samurai. You don't want a Japanese knight type character. You want the theories behind it, the feel of it, and you put that into the dwarven culture, and that hits that note for them. You've made a compromise. I guarantee you, more often than not, if you have the conversation, you will find that compromise, and both sides will be happy.
Yeah.
Okay. Listen, I got to tell you right now, we've made it to 400 episodes without tipping our hand that all of this jamming advice is really just about having a candid conversation. Shut up.
Yes.
We're not gonna have any more advice left on the show if you tip our biggest secret.
Yeah.
Yeah. But no, yes. I really think it comes down to finding out what because I've never had a player come to me with something that if we didn't talk to them about it, found something that we can get excited about it. If they say they want Cthulhu, like, I do not want any Cthulhu mythos in here. But what is it you like about the Cthulhu mythos? Now, if all they say is tentacles, I'm like, all right, fine, we'll have squids or something.
Yeah.
But if it's something, unless it's something they want that, I actually want to see Cthulhu, you're like, no, I'm not going to do that. But you can find, I like the mystery, I like the darkness, I like the
nihilistic,
the nihilistic, the hopelessness of it. you could bring that in with something else.
Yeah.
I agree. I think your reskinning thing is probably the best bet, right? Because it's basically saying, look, I don't want to do samurai, but tell me what's cool about samurai. Let's find a place for that, and let's find a place in the world where I will also be excited about that, and so will you.
I'll tell you right now, after communication, I think that reskinning is one of the top 5 tools in my bag all the time.
Yeah. Good stuff.
Reskinning goes a long way.
All right.
I've used it in every facet.
All right. So I want Cthulhu Rancors riding light cycles now.
I'm gonna bring up one more. Vampire 54 was talking about you can't play a ninja.
Yeah.
And I want to bring this up because I think we've all heard the story, and I've definitely had players who've been along these lines as well. In fact, it wasn't a ninja, but let me back up. So, a lot of times, players want to play a certain type of character in a game, right? It's just the thing that they're most comfortable from, and so for instance, the story you always hear is like the player who always wants to be a ninja no matter what game we play, right? Are there ninjas in this world? Can I be a ninja? Right. And everybody's like, no, Brad, you can't be a ninja. Right. In my old days of more militant GMing, when I was much more of a control freak and less aware of my own control issues, I had that stance, right? No, Brad, there are no ninjas in this world. Play something else. As I've grown older and possibly softer, or at least have checked most of my control issues into a place where I can manage them, what I've come to learn is Brad derives his enjoyment of the game by playing ninjas or other stealthy, sneaky characters that kill things. Why am I forcing Brad to do something that Brad not to do something that Brad clearly enjoys and would have plenty of emotional attachment to the game and commitment from Brad if I could find a way to make it work in the game, which goes back to your reskinning thing. Like, no, Brad, there are not ninjas, but there is an assassin's guild and, whatever. Or there are, there's this thing, there's that thing. Yeah. Like I had a player, Bob is in the game, and I think he knows exactly who I'm talking about, whose main form of enjoyment in the game was to have magical powers. And what it really came down to was this was a person who I think, and I'm going to just armchair psychology this, who didn't always feel exceptional, special, or whatever. And they derived their enjoyment from the game by having a character that could do more and do things that even other characters couldn't do, right? They could bend the laws of nature. They could do that. And that was their main source of enjoyment. And on more than one occasion, I stomped on it. And I think now unfairly that this was what this person really enjoyed. And if I just worked a little and wasn't rigid on, the world I created because it's my special, my special crystal or whatever, that we could find room for that player to have that experience, to find their joy. Now, not every player is like that. There are plenty of players who are like, hey man, just pass me a playbook. I'll be happy to play. And that's great. But there are certain players who they have a type, they want to play that type. And my advice is don't force them out of it. Find a way to make that space for them. It's their happy.
Now,
let them have their
happy. Can you do that in every single game they play in with you? Maybe not.
You'd be surprised.
Sometimes you might have to have them lean a little bit into the compromise if you can get them to. But more often than not, you can find something.
I mean, an engineer in Star Trek
is
its own form of wizard. Right? Like, they're bending the laws of reality, right? Like, they're making things happen that other people can, right? Like, it's all about finding that spot, right? So if it's like you want to do the things that ordinary people can't do, cool. In almost every role-playing game, I can find you that character.
Okay, how about they want to play a werewolf in Gangbusters?
Okay, so, right. All right, no, it's fine. So really what we're talking about...
Go ahead.
Okay, so really, again, this is your reskinning thing, right? So, like, look, we don't have magic in the game, so you're not transformed, right? So what is it you want to play? You want to play like somebody who like frenzies, who's like really strong and powerful, who frenzies, can take a lot of damage? Wow, we can get you that.
Yeah.
Like, I can get you that character.
No, but I literally want to be a wolf man.
Yeah, that's what I get.
Well, look.
Shut up, Brad.
This is not the game for you, then.
Like, there's two sides of a compromise, right? Brad's gonna have to
Yeah.
Brad's gonna have to come in a little on this as well. But like when it's something like the ninja, the wizard, something like that, like, no, you can't have magic, but what if I give you cool reasoning powers, like detective power? Like, what if, what if I make you like the Sherlock Holmes of this Gangbusters game? Like,
And some of it's perception. Like, you go back to the engineer on a starship. It's going to
Yeah.
take me 2 days to fix this, Captain. 17 hours later, I got this. We're done. It's good to go.
Or hey, I'm gonna modify the warp nacelles to project this bubble that's gonna allow us to get past the problem.
Yeah.
Kick ass, Jordy.
You're a
Rock
magician.
on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah, exactly.
All right,
Anyway,
we should jump back in.
Yeah, it was my heartfelt moment
Yeah.
about like just
Go ahead.
have these revelations years later about shitty things I may have done as a past GM. All right, welcome
I feel
back.
ya.
We're in the second half of this segment where we're going to do our roundtable with our own questions, but we are happy to take questions from anyone in the chat room if you hear stuff that comes up. Okay, so my first question for us.
I'm going to jump into the restroom while you do that.
Yes. When starting out a game, how much world building is necessary? And I'll give some examples. Build big and dole out parts. Build small and expand. Or hit them with the fire hose, right? Just build big and give it to them all at once.
All right, I got some feels on this one. Feels, but good.
Me too.
First of all, it's going to depend entirely on the game. I like to have enough to play in the basics of a campaign and have some details from the local area, but then I like to leave some things undiscovered so that we can evolve them in the games. Just some room to have things that the players can explore, maybe things that I haven't quite decided yet because I haven't decided where the story's going to go. And you can even go to the extremes. About 3 years ago now, I decided that because of things like that Phil just talked about, all of the players I had came from different game groups. And in playing other games with them, I realized that all of them had I've always wanted to play this character, but I never get a chance to play it. And so I said, all right, we're going to do a complete world building from scratch as a group, collaborative world building. I said, I'm going to put some ground rules down, no drow, no firearms, and no steampunky magic. Just it's going to be a fantasy campaign world, and we're going to go from there. And we went around the table, and I started first with the players and asked them, what kind of character do you have in mind? And from there, we built things up. So one person wanted to be an artificially created rat man. Well, guess what? Now we're going to have some race artificially created rat men. One wanted to play a non-contagious werewolf. Great, we'll do that. One decided to play a gentleman dwarf. And this became important because that tells me a lot about the dwarven culture. But also, another player said, I've got an idea. What if all the dwarves in the world are feral like goblins? And we can't do that because somebody else already established something in the game. Once we establish something as part of the character, that's the way it is. There might be a small culture of them, but that's not how dwarves are perceived. And we built on it from there. It was chaotic. It made it very tough to run the game in the long run because we didn't have a shared history yet. And I was trying to do everything collaboratively, and everything collaborative doesn't always work. But it was fun to play, and everybody had a good idea of what they wanted to do. And then we worked together as a group to make everything mesh together. And things I wasn't planning, like it turned out that the dominant race on the planet were goblins and orcs. There's a major cataclysm, and they were the ones who rebuilt civilization. Somebody wanted samurai, so the orcs had a very militaristic code of honor culture. Orcs were big and military and strong and prone to attacking things, but they did it by a bunch of codes of honor. Klingon.
Right, you get closer to Klingon with that. Yeah,
so it worked.
Yeah, I once in a game, in my L Hall game, right? So one of the things I wanted to do was kind of avoid some of those. One, I didn't have too many other species in the game, right? Humans, like it was primarily just humans beating up on humans, or I had the alien demons as the main bad guy. But on the other continent, I had orcs, and in my game, because again, I was trying very hard to avoid like the orc stereotypes. In El Hall, humans couldn't sail because they hadn't mastered navigation, but orcs could. So like humans could sail as long as they could see the coastline, right? So they could sail up and down the coast, but orcs could cross the ocean because they had mastered navigation and they had mastered a whole bunch of other sciences that the humans didn't have. Anyway,
before we move on, the other thing I was going to just mention, I've mentioned this before, and I want to say, if you are looking to figure out how to build a campaign with just little things, I would strongly suggest picking up a copy of the second edition AD&D World Builders Guidebook. It was a product they put together that each chapter was a different stage of world building. They started out with like cosmology, and then what kind of religions are you going to have, and then what are the continents like, how much water is in the world, what the weather's like, what are the nations, and you worked down to small details. You went world, and then hemispheres, and then continents, and then nations, and then political affiliations in those nations, and then like duchies, and then towns, and then individual buildings. And what they said was, as a GM, you probably have some idea of what you want to do. Find that chapter, fill out your chart from there, and then either roll randomly, they had lots of tables in there, or just build it out in either direction as things evolve in the game. And so it allowed people who didn't have a lot of GMing experience, or who had an idea and didn't know what to do with it, to say, I've got this, I want to play in this town. And then once you're in the town, you can zoom out in either direction, zoom down lower, get larger detail. It's a nice little tool. It's got lots of pages, and now it's a PDF, so you can print out copies of the forms and everything.
Oh, neat.
Nice.
But I would recommend it strongly for people who want to take something, or if you've been playing a bunch of one-shots and you decide you want to make this into a campaign and haven't done anything with it yet, this will help to give you some structure so that you can take the parts you have and then build the bridges between them. So anyway, I just wanted to mention that because I think it really helps a lot. So Phil?
Yeah, so I'll talk about, so I'm very much a zoom out world builder. And I have a reason for this, right? Which goes hand in hand with my run 4 sessions to decide if a game is viable. So I need to tell a story as a precautionary tale. So years ago, I wanted to run Mutants and Masterminds because like we were high on D20, right? It was the early 2000s, so we were really high on D20, and I wanted to play superheroes game, and I was like, cool, let's play D20 superheroes, right? Because that's cool. And what you call it? So I wanted to do that. Sorry, there's like some commotion going on in my house. I'm not 100% sure what's going on. I think it's okay. So I wanted to play this, and I was like, cool. I had this premise, which in the end, I'm going to tell you was not a good premise. It was stupid. I had this premise of like, why does anyone live in Manhattan? Right? Like, if you look at the Marvel universe, why does anyone live in Manhattan? Right? Like, it's just one perpetual superhero fight after another, right? Like, you go to bed at night, and sometime in the morning on the weekend, the Thing uses your car to bash Dr. Doom. What do you do? Right? Like, you're out of, like, your car's gone or whatever. Why do you live here? Why don't you just move uptown? So I like spun this thing into this whole idea, like, well, what if we were responsible about superheroes, right? And so I went bonkers, and I wrote like 50 pages of history of this world from like World War II up to modern times, and like how the first superheroes were discovered, and the Cold War done through superheroes, and Glasnost, and like all of these things down to superhero insurance and being licensed superheroes and all this stuff. 50 pages of world building. I come to the table, we're excited, we make up characters, we're playing in the world. The game is not good. Not that Mutants and Masterminds isn't good. Whatever was happening at the table,
it fell flat.
It fell flat. And in like 4 sessions, it died, and I had 50 pages of world building that we like hardly even scratched the surface on. And so from that point on, I was like, I will not do this again, right? Like I will not over world build. So I am a huge proponent, and then I'm going to contradict myself. So watch this, because I'm going to do this all in the same. I'm going to do this all in the same thread. I'm a huge proponent of starting very small, with a couple of high concepts, and focusing in on the town, right? Like what you were talking about, Jerry. Right? Focusing on the town, and then as we start playing more, pulling back and showing more parts of the world, right? Like expand it, show more parts of the world, expand it, show more parts of the world, have other things come in, right? Like when you're a first level character, right? If we're using the D&D analogy, if you're first level character, the ogre in the caves is your big threat, and the sheriff of the town, right? And then when you're like 5th level, like now your problems are bigger. So now the area gets bigger, and now we introduce other things, right? Like now at 5th level, the lord of the area is now interested in you, right? And the bad guys are bigger. And then like, as you get higher in the campaign, you you zoom out again until finally, by the end of the campaign, you are, handling the fate of the world.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay. That's my favorite thing. Now I'm going to totally contradict that with my Masks game. So when we wanted to play Masks, I was like, cool, I want to have a history of the world to draw from. And so we did a microscope-like session where we made a timeline. No deep details, but we made a timeline of the Golden Age, the Silver Age, the Iron Age, and the Modern Age of our Halcyon City. And I had like a couple of requirements in each one, like I think we all added details, but in each one of those eras, I was like, what is the big multi-issue series that occurred?
The crossover event?
Yeah, what's the big crossover event that occurred in each one of those eras? And name a political thing, a geography thing, whatever. And we, for like one session, sat at Panera and brained out that whole thing with index cards and all that stuff. And it was fantastic.
Yep.
So much so that we played our whole game of Masks using that Halcyon City, and we're able to actually, by the end of the campaign, use a good chunk of what we created. I had a whole time-spanning superhero event that occurred that took place in different times and stuff like that. And then when we decided to play Icons just a few months ago, we were like, why would we build another superhero world? Let's just use our Halcyon City again. Let's just pick a different era and start playing, at that point in time, which we did. I guess my point is...
Another thing about that is what that did was it created a completely different level of world building for that campaign. We had a bunch of existing stuff, and now we're like, all right, we're going to slot some stuff in here. We're going to slot some stuff in here, figure out where we fit into this existing timeline, and then proceed to flesh it out with a few more bits here and there, as opposed to a completely fresh.
Yeah. And what was important for Masks, and the reason why we did that, was Masks is a game about playing teenage superheroes. But the thing that you butt up against as the teenage superheroes are the adult superheroes.
Yep.
It's one of the things you butt up against. So what we were doing in that world building was we were kind of coming up with who are the adults that are going to be annoying for these characters, and why, right? And not all of them were annoying. Bob's grandmother was a Golden Age superhero who had retired. Tesla was a villain. Yeah. We had all sorts of things. The point being is that one, I will highly recommend don't overbuild your world before you play it, right? Like if you want to do something like a full session 1, and we did it collaboratively, right? So I didn't just come to the table with it, right? We built it collaboratively, so we had all that emotional investment, but we never went into huge details about it, right? In 3 hours, we covered something like 80 something years worth of history.
Yeah.
With just some bullet points and stuff like that. So it was very manageable.
Yeah.
Two, and Jerry, I think you said this, the game will dictate what it needs for background, right? I very much wanted a history of the game because I wanted these teenagers to realize that like a whole lot of stuff had happened.
Yeah.
That they were too young for, and now like they're shaping now the mantle's being passed to them. They're shaping the world in their generation.
Yep.
Yep.
And again, since I will potentially throw out any campaign in 4 sessions, I don't over world build because I may be just jettisoning this game, right? Like I may just in 4 sessions be like, this is awful. We're out of here.
Don't go too deep.
Yeah. So for that purpose, I am one who is more moderate on world building. And I'm very much one that is much more into world building on the fly. Like, and I'll just make this last point before I tie off my section here. We were playing Forbidden Lands the other night, and Bob and the crew went into this dwarven crypt to clear out some trolls. And I just made up what the dwarven crypt looked like the world building around it, like how more prominent clans had their own like mausoleums, and how lesser people had just the holes in the wall, and then what did it look like, and like all of those descriptions. Like that bit of world building was just on the fly. Like it was just like I needed a description for it. I'm comfortable doing that. Like it's one of those things I'm comfortable doing as a GM, and I just like built it up right there. And presented it. And my tell for that is when I retread a description, so that Bob knows when we're playing. Anytime I retread a description, it means I'm refining it like on the fly.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I start building it, and then I back up and I rebuild it a little. That's me fixing it on the fly. Yeah, I like that stuff a bunch. Bob, how about you? When it comes to playing, what do you need for setting? Like,
Yeah,
how much is too much?
To me, obviously, I think it depends greatly on the game that you're playing. But I kind of prefer the minimum amount for everybody to be comfortable making a character to inhabit that world.
Yeah.
So that you've got enough to be like, okay, I know kind of what goes on here and what the culture's like or whatever, so I can put something into that world and be able to interact with it and make it believable, for purposes of playing in the fiction and doing that kind of thing. And then you allow for additional world building to take place on the fly during play and between sessions. That being said, we have 2 topical questions that go right into this. So I'm just going to bring these up now rather than wait for later.
Sure.
Andy asked, where do you stop world building and start playing to build the world? Which is an awesome question for this.
Yep. I think if every character feels like they have enough of themselves together to play, right? So if I just go around the table and I'm like, is everybody comfortable with their character? And people are like, yeah, I'm good. I can get into character from this point. And I know what we need. Like, I know what we need to do in the first adventure. Like, I know what the situation is if we're using Jason Pitt's structures. I know what the situation is. We're good. Like we could keep building, but we won't need it because we're going to build more than I can. We're going to build more than I can get into the game.
Yeah.
And there's
very
nothing
much
wrong
about
with
comfort
that.
level.
Yeah, it's so I guess the analogous part of it is, how in Swords Without Master, the discovery phase is the phase you play when you don't know what's going to happen next in the game. And you just keep playing the discovery phase until you know what you need to do. That to me is how world building works. As soon as you know what you need to do in game, you can stop world building and then go play to find out.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Jared, do you have any other ideas on that?
Not on question 1.
Okay, cool.
Okay. The next question's from A-Bomb, our friend Aaron. Welcome to the show. Haven't seen you in a while. What is better, letting the players create the world around to have them have more stake in the game, or is it better to bring a framework of a world to the game as the GM? And we kind of touched on that already, but we can flesh that out a little more.
I think it's not an either or. I think it's a both.
Yeah.
I think really you have to have whatever framework is necessary to make you comfortable to run the game. You also have to have whatever framework is necessary to give the players some direction on what they should be building with. In our collaborative game that I did, one of the problems I had is I didn't put enough of a framework down. And so the characters all sounded interesting, but once we started playing a couple of sessions, we didn't have enough of a framework. And I had to go back and rework. It a couple times to add more structure to it. And sometimes kind of re-edit things we'd already established in the world. Something I was trying not to do because it was kind of an experiment. But that's what you need to do. You need to have some framework that you as a GM can feel comfortable with, knowing these are the kind of adventures I'd like to run, at least initially, what will fit into that framework. And also tell the players, this is the framework I'd like you all to fit into as well, so that you don't end up with things that are contrary or at odds with whatever style you want. And some of that comes back to session 0 things. So,
cool.
Bill?
Yeah, I'm again of the mindset that you need a couple things in the game, right? I'm gonna go back to Jason Pitt's structures here, right? Mm-hmm. So if you know what the setting is, if you understand the setting of the game and you understand the situation, and to me, the situation thing is like the biggest thing. Like, this is the biggest thing I now think about when I think about a campaign and when I think about even my own game designs and even my own world designs, right? It's not the setting, it's the situation. What is it the players do, right? So I want to come to the game with either a framework that covers that, or I want to come to the game with a set of questions/requirements that I want us to answer in order to get us to the part where we can play the game, right? So like when I did the masks thing, I didn't just show up and be like, cool, let's just make up some history. I like laid it out for everybody. I was like, cool, there are 5 periods of comic book history I want to cover, right? I want to cover the golden age of comics, right? Which is like the 40s. I want to cover the Silver Age, which is like the 50s, 60s, 70s. I want to cover the Iron Age, right? And I even named the comic book series, right? Like that kind of went with, these. And then I said to them, I want crossover events. I want locations in the city. I want here's a list of villain names. I want you to pull these in. I structured the whole thing with those requirements. And I was like, when we have answered all of these things, I will have more than enough to build the game from, right? I kind of knew, like for Masks, I knew the situation of the game, right? It's teenage superheroes, getting into superhero stuff and then having feelings about it, right? Like that Masks is a pretty straightforward game in that respect. But I knew what I needed in order to be able to set up those situations, right? I knew what I needed bad guys. I needed adult superheroes to scold the heroes. I needed organizations to be, having machinations. So I think the compromise is either build enough so that you can answer all those questions and bring it to everybody, and only build enough so that it's digestible. Like if I explain it to you in a short sitting, you can ingest all of it and understand it. No fire hose. In reference to UHF, right? You get to drink from the fire hose.
I found the marble in the oatmeal.
Yes. Or if you don't build it yourself and bring it, then come with the things that you need. Bring the needs, and then work until you answer all those needs.
Cool.
So it could be like, again, I'll give a D&D example. So we're gonna play D&D. And we know that pretty much we're gonna do dungeons, fight monsters, that kind of thing. But the things I might need for my initial build-up is what legends have you heard about about Skull Mountain, right? Like again, leading questions, right? What is the most terrifying area near your village? right? Those, like, that's the things I want, like, to bring to the table for people to make. And then I'll be like, cool, thank you. I'm going to go put something now terrifying inside Skull Mountain or whatever, right? And like, off I go and go do some work. Okay.
Cool.
Yep.
All right. Question 2.
Question 2. What is the role of world building between sessions, Phil?
So I touched on this early on in the segment, so I'll just touch on it again briefly here. I think you benefit greatly from not building a lot up front and building more of the world once you get the game going, for the exact reason why TV series always seem better from the second season on, right? Your first season is always like your weakest season because you understand the least about the world. But once you've kind of covered a season, or in this case, in a role-playing game, we've had a bunch of sessions, the things I build next will be so much better, right? So for instance, and I'm going to go back to Star Trek, because again, I've been reading a lot of Star Trek. The original idea in, I think, episode 3, the introduction of the Ferengi, was that the Ferengi were going to be the major bad guy for all of Next Gen.
Oops.
Right? But it's clear after they played that adventure that, like, the Ferengi don't come off as terrifying, right? They're like, you're just like, they're annoying, right? And at best, I don't even, like, most of the players don't even want them in the game again.
The players
right?
pulled the GM off to the side and said, look, your big bads are comical. Like, I can't take them seriously. You need to work on that.
So then the series, like, lays off on a big bad for a while, and then comes back later after having gone through a few seasons with the Borg, right?
Dun dun dun.
Because having done all those episodes and having built up Q, right? Because Q, again, responsible for the Borg.
Yep.
Having built up Q, the introduction of the Borg comes off so well. Because the writers at that point are building off of everything that's happened before. And I say the same thing is true for your campaigns. Like, when you launch your campaign, as long as you got enough of a hook where players are like, oh, I totally want to go into the dungeon.
Yeah.
And hint, players, if you agreed to play the game, you want to go into the dungeon, right?
That's right.
We've talked about this before as well.
Take the damn bait.
Yeah.
Take the damn bait. Don't make the GM, like, suffer over trying to get the hook into your mouth. Anyway, after you've played a bunch, the next arc you build, the next chunk of the world you add will be so much better. Especially if you're doing any world building in game, because now as you're building some things, you'll be like, oh, I'm totally pulling that piece into my game, or, oh, based on those actions, they let that person go. Oh, I'm totally, like, that person's getting incorporated into this next chunk of world. And I think you just get a much richer, experience. So my advice is, do a little world building as your campaign management. You don't have to do a ton. You can do it in game as well. Like, you could just bring questions and build new chunks. Because if it works for you as the GM, having played a whole bunch of games and making stuff, it will totally work for the group if they've all played a bunch of games and are helping to build stuff, right? It's not exclusively a GM thing. I think there's a ton of value.
Yeah.
On top of that, the other good portion of this is the players have digested all of the previous material. So they're now ready to digest more. So now you can give them a new whole chunk, and you don't have to worry about them remembering the other chunk of world, because they already played in that. All those memories are coded. Now they can process this new world chunk.
Yeah.
Okay.
I love the analogy of next gen episodes as RPG sessions.
Yes.
That's a great, it's filling me with all kinds of wild scenarios. Like, imagine you're a party, you're ground level in Waterdeep, and all of a sudden one day after like 5, 10, 15, 20 sessions, whatever, you're like chugging along, and all of a sudden Elminster pops in and he goes, we're going to go for a ride. And he teleports you to the other side of the freaking planet and shows you, oh, here's a coven of vampires who are relentless. And all of a sudden somebody goes, holy shit, I'm glad those guys aren't in Waterdeep. And the vampires go, Waterdeep? Oh,
Yeah.
you have to go check that place out. Oh, great. Now they're aware of us and they're going to come looking.
Uh-huh.
Like, oh, shit.
Yeah, TNG holds up really well to the GM, what you call it, the adventure mechanism.
Yeah.
All right. So
Did
for
anyone?
me,
Yeah, go ahead. I was gonna say other people have answers for
yeah.
that, right?
Yeah. Yes.
For me, world building between sessions, it's for that. Everything you said obviously is great. I like to think of it as the place where that sudden inspiration that you got, you're like, oh, you're sitting there and you're like, next week we're going to be going into, town, and it's like looking for that guy that works for that organization. It's like, oh, hey, maybe that's the organization that I worked for briefly back before I joined the adventuring party. Like, you get that light bulb moment and you're like, ooh, that kind of thing. Or something happened last session and you're like, we left a little bit vague about that, and all of a sudden I'm like, ooh, if we flesh that out with this and add more detail to it, those are the kind of things that I love that organically happen in between sessions while you're thinking about the game. Excuse me. And all of that stuff deepens the setting and makes your campaign richer. Love that stuff. Excuse me. What about you, Jared?
As a GM, for me, I really think it's filling in the gaps and taking what was discovered this section to expand on the world, keeping track of those little details that people have. Bob and I were talking about this before the show, that Chris has a common thing that happens when he's either GMing or running a game. When somebody says something that is now be part of the world, he's like, well, that's a thing now. And you take note of that kind of stuff, because that is a thing now. And it's nice to have those little pieces that as a GM you might not have actually fleshed out entirely. The players might fill all that in with their own conjecture. It can also be just setting up entire, a guild that you never knew existed before, but somebody asked a question about it. Or sometimes even just supposes about it. Maybe they're trying to solve a mystery and so, gee, are we missing something? What if, it turns out there is a secret coven of vampires running this city? Like, maybe there is a secret coven of vampires running the city now, that sort of thing, or the next city over. There's a lot of room between sessions to fill that in, and also talk to the players about things. Hey, you did this really cool thing last week. What do you think about A, B, and C? Or do you have some thoughts about why you did this or why it was done? They might have this whole fan fiction in their brain that they were working on, and they're going to give you some really good hooks that they didn't give you initially. It's also, lastly, a really good place for a GM to fill in the world by also taking chunks of somebody's background that didn't make it into their original background. We've all had the player who has a 40-page background for their character that, as GMs, we're not going to touch with a 10-foot pole. But if they've got stuff in there that they want to toss into the world, this is the place that you as a GM can have them do that. If they've got a villain or an evil nation or something like that they really want to have in the game, this is the place for them to put it in and drop a hint, and then you can develop it for it. So it's basically taking the communication and fleshing it out. So
I think we're all pro. It sounds like we're all pro world building between sessions.
Oh, yeah.
Yes. Very much so. Very, very much so.
I feel like that's fair.
Yeah.
Last question. And again, if we have any questions that come in from the chat room, we'll absolutely address those too. But question 3, how do you document your world building so that it can be referenced later?
These days, mostly I've been using documents on Google Drive. I'll make 2 documents, one that's just for me and one that's for the players, so that as time goes on, we can add things, make notes, and I'll keep track of the things that we establish in the game. Every name that's dropped, every location that's dropped, every plot hook that's dropped, and put that in there. But also leave it open for the players to go in and add their own little hooks or comments or fleshing out as well. And as I said in the past, I really enjoyed using the World Builders Guidebook and the associated charts. But most of it's just, in a notebook or in a Google Drive doc. Bob?
Cool. I tend to use OneNote a lot. That is usually outside of game sessions, either before, during brainstorming, when I'm coming up with background, or if I think of something in between sessions or whatever, I'll make notes in there. I usually create a OneNote page for my character during any campaign. And then whenever something comes up that's directly related to my character, whether it's in the middle of the session or as we're sitting at the table doing session 0 or whatever, I usually have some spots on my character sheet depending on what game it is, or definitely the stack of index cards, the ubiquitous index cards, where I will write down important things. Usually it's just enough of a bullet point to remind me of the thing, so I'm not keeping like copious detailed paragraphs, but any kind of trigger thing that's going to remind me of what I'm writing it down for. So that's what I do.
Yeah, I'm bad about this, right? I bring this up because I'm not fantastic about it. So if it's going to be something that I'm going to share with everyone, it's a Google Doc, right? That's Google Doc is my default way of sharing everything. I'll just, throw a folder into Google Drive. I'll open up a doc. So like our Halcyon city timelines, like those are all accessible in Google Docs. I keep my own stuff in OneNote. As much as I love Google Docs for a lot of things, I love the freedom of formatting and positioning things in a OneNote page that is far more conducive to how I like to organize my information for running a game. So I will always have my own notebook in OneNote for a campaign, and I'll have some additional information in there. But if it's shareable, I will keep it in the Google Doc for everyone. During the game, because a lot of the stuff that gets world built in the game gets done on the fly. So I think people know this, right? I always have a stack of index cards when I'm playing. Mm-hmm. I'm always writing on my index cards. And then my follow-up loop, and I think we've talked about this before as well, is at the end of a game session, I take my phone and I use a product called Microsoft Lens, and I actually scan all my index cards as images and put them as OneNote pages into my notebook, so that I have the notes that I use to run the game, and then I have the index cards, because I almost never transcribe those index cards back out. I'll never just sit there after a game and be like, okay, I need to record this thing into the world notes or whatever, right? Like I wrote it in the thing. So what winds up happening is I have like all these index cards and I keep them physically, but going through the index cards is kind of a pain in the ass. Having them all in OneNote as subpages to the session that I ran is super easy, right? I can just go through really quick, find what I'm looking for, pull it back out. If a game has a lot of NPCs, having an NPC sheet is good, right? Sometimes I have it just in OneNote, sometimes I have it in Google Drive, those kinds of things when I need them. I'm also the kind that does not hammer players for not remembering world parts. I'm happy to just remind everybody, like, oh yes, like let's have a quick overview over, this organization again. Like, remember this organization? I'll fill in some details or whatever. But yeah, and then if I'm a player, it's a little different. If I'm a player, I have field notebooks. They're these really simple little notebooks. They got like flexible cardboard covers, and I just write my character notes in those things. And so then when I come back to a session before we start playing, I just go back a page or two and kind of read. Like, it helps me catch up on what happened in the adventure, but if there's any other world building information that I wrote in there, I'll find it as well. So yeah, it's like I said, I don't have like a master system for it. Like, it's not spectacular. Like, I tend to just, I will document it. So it's typed somewhere because I don't trust me to remember anything.
It's a flexible system.
It's a flexible system. It's like the Pirates Code. It's like more of a guideline. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah, I'm good.
All right. So that is our discussion on world building. We hope that you all enjoyed it. So we're going to take one more trip to the chat room and see what's going on, and then we're going to hop over to the conversation corner.
All right, we hit the chat room during a couple of those questions, so we're all caught up.
Cool.
So let's jump right to the conversation corner.
I have a question.
Yeah,
for the
go ahead.
Chat room.
Go ahead.
Why does Massachusetts pronounce it GM Gerrymander?
I don't know.
Oh, I don't know.
I have no clue. All right. Okay, just somebody dropped that in there and then disappeared.
Yeah, unfortunately, that was Avi the Jackal, and he had to go, so he's not here to fill us in.
I have no clue. That's okay. We don't believe in Massachusetts. It's okay. So.
All right, let me drive us into the conversation corner here.
Yep.
I love that. It's cute. All right, we are in the conversation corner. Yay.
Mm-hmm.
Hey. A few minutes about what's going on in our other things that we've been doing.
Stuff.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. Anybody want to jump in first?
Yeah, I'm going to start. So I have been working on a super secret project, and I'm just going to tease a little bit here, just real quick, for those watching the stream.
Hans,
Booby, put the gun away. This is radio. So I have a little something here.
Bob is holding up a set of cards called Circle of Six, which is a game that Bob designed a little while ago. Are those the ones back from Drive-Thru?
That is back from Drive-Thru.
How do they look?
They look really good. There's some formatting, some minor formatting things with the bleed and whatnot. Mostly because, unfortunately, for whatever reason, Tim couldn't find the original Illustrator files for any of the images. So I had to take my versions of them that I had gotten from him off of, like, he put them all on like one page, and then I cropped them out and made cards out of them. So I took those and created everything from that. So there's just some minor stuff, like I had outlines on them with the corners on them for the cards, and their corners are a slightly different radius than those corners, and so that shows up as part of the card in the corners. I just got to clean up a few things and push some stuff out to the edge a little bit more. There's some black on the tops of some of them. Little minor formatting stuff that should be easy to clean up. But the cards are nice. They feel like, they feel like cards. They're like
the cards from whatchamacallit are always so good.
Cards.
Yeah. So that was nice. And I'm also working on phase 2 of that super secret project, which I teased Phil with earlier.
Yes, I saw a little bit of that myself.
And I'm not going to say anything more about that. Besides that, excited about the watch party tonight for Next Gen. Although, tomorrow morning is going to be rough getting up. It always is after the watch party.
Yeah.
I have been indulging in some more retail therapy. Most recently, I ordered a couple of cast iron pans. I got a 10.5-inch pan and I got a wee 5-inch pan. It's super cute.
You make some nice eggs in that.
And I've been fighting the urge to back another $100 plus board game Kickstarter.
Oh.
I'm eyeballing it. I'm side eyeing it. I'm going, nah. There's still like 27 more days before I have to worry about pulling the trigger on it. So maybe I'll I'll talk myself out of it. But I'm looking at it and go, oh, that could be fun. And if they get all their stretch
game is
goals.
that?
It's crap. I can't think of the damn name now. It's if I'm not mistaken, it's another piratey game from like AEG. It's gonna have a lot of stuff.
Cool.
It looks fun and interesting though. So I forget who it was from, but yeah, it's that's my thing right now. Is like, oh, that Kickstarter looks great, and then it'll be a game that I have to try and get to the table at some point. So
when we can have tables.
Yeah, when we get back to tables.
Yes.
Other than that, my copy of the latest Dresden Files book from Jim Butcher showed up today. So at some point I got to sit down and read Peace Talks. And then gird myself for September when the next book comes out. Because he did 2 of them back to back. Ah, what?
Yeah, That's bonkers.
Yeah. But that's me. What about y'all's?
So I finally got my taxes done.
Woohoo.
I lagged a little. I think we talked about this, right? I lagged a little because the computer that had my last year's tax files on it died, and I was luckily like last month revived that computer, was able to get my files off of it, and then was slammed with my big project at work. So finally, I was like, okay, I got to go do my taxes, which was okay. Wasn't great, wasn't terrible. Having encoded on my taxes. And after the year we had last year, I paid for that a little. I didn't owe, but I certainly didn't get back like I usually do. Which definitely means, and I saw it on the thing, right? I definitely crossed a bracket.
Yeah.
Thanks to Encoded. Thanks, Encoded. So anyway, that was fine. I got that done, which was good because it was just eating up spoons thinking about it being out there and not done. We talked about Minecraft, which was cool. I've been watching more DS9. I'm getting so close to coming around full circle on the whole series and having it done, which is excellent. I've been wrestling with a little depression, just lockdown depression. I think largely because when this all started, I was like, well, we'll all lock down. It'll be hard. And then by summer, like, we'll be through it. The world can resume, and maybe we'll have to lock down again in September, like in the fall, right?
Yeah.
Like maybe when the flu season comes around, we'll have to lock down again. But no, that's not what happened. I don't want to point any blame, except that this state that we're in has been downward trending for many, many days. And in the vernacular, has its shit together.
Yep.
Other states,
not so much.
Not as much. Other states not taking it seriously. And thanks to them, there are now 14 states I can't travel to. Yep. Because one, I'll have to quarantine if I come back to New York. Yep. And two, as a state employee, there are some other hitches to me screwing around in any state that is considered a high COVID state right now. Yep. So thanks, states. You know who you are. So anyway, I just wound up with like a pretty big hit of depression from that. Like I was just feeling very hopeless, right? Like it still all feels hopeless, right? I don't understand what's going to happen. We'll talk more about it in the after show. Like I don't understand what's going to happen with my kids going to school, any of this nonsense. So I'm kind of finding my way out of it, right? These depression things kind of come and go in waves, right? I feel very hopeless, and then like I just like next day kind of pull myself together, kind of thing. I've had some panic attacks. I've had some shit over the last couple of weeks. Like I'm not in great mental space. I'm finally to the point where I want to kind of do something creative. Like I've been since lockdown. Like I haven't wanted to design anything, write anything. I've kept my games going, but I haven't really done much beyond that. And my games are all like almost published, at the exception of Icons, are all published adventures anyway. So I'm not doing anything super creative. But I've been getting the itch to be creative. And I sat down and made like a mind map last night of like all the possible things I could be creative on. And at this point, like nothing's jumped out at me, right? Like I looked over the whole mind map and then I took a red pen and wrote all over it, like why that won't work. Right? Like, just like, well, these are all games. You'd have to have another time to run a game. Guess what? You don't have any more time to run games. Yeah. Like, these are fine, but you'll have to do some level of collaboration. And this, like, I don't even know what I would write for a short story. Why am I even writing this on the page? Right? Like, I drew all over it. And so I kept it on my desk and I've been staring at it for like the last day. And I'm trying to find, like, I don't know, like I'm starting to build up a little energy. I kind of want to work on something, but like I can't find it yet. And I know like not to just jump into something that I'm lukewarm on because it'll never last, right? I flitted through a few books the same way. Like I started reading this book. Station 11, which is like very good sci-fi book. And I started reading it, and I forgot what it was about until I started reading it. And it's about 20 years after this global pandemic. And I'm like, yeah, nope. Close the book.
I'm true with this guy.
Yeah.
Like, nope. Let me take another crack at trying to read The Water Knife. That's probably a better idea for me. Like, so anyway, I don't know. I don't know. Like, I'm in a healthy enough mental space that I'm getting enough sleep. I'm eating okay, and I'm not trying to buy everything under the sun. I'm trying to buy a few things, but I'm not trying to buy everything under the sun.
Yeah.
But I can't quite find my creative place to work in yet, and I am a little itchy for it. So I'm still branching out for that.
I feel you on the creativity part, because I was feeling very much the same thing. And it's been since early in the year. And I've had Circle of Six sitting dormant on the shelf behind me. And I would look at it every once in a while. And I'm like, you know what? That one has enough of a passion behind it from back in the day that if I start poking at it again, it should have enough impetus to push itself into getting me going. And that's why I started Secret Project. I'm like, I got to do something. So I sat down, and it got me to purchase the Affinity Suite, start learning how to do the graphic design and layout type stuff that's necessary for doing that. and then phase 2 and all of that stuff. And it was enough to get me rolling downhill. And now it's turned into, like, it's my thing that's my side thing after Minecraft to help with my sanity during the down times. So I feel you.
Yeah. I will mention
find
one last.
That.
Yeah, thank you. I don't know where it is yet. I'm gonna just quote you two on this, right? I still haven't found what I'm looking for.
Yep.
Right? Like, the last thing I will mention is I was sitting around on Sunday, and I was like, I was gonna watch some Star Trek, and then Netflix was like, "Hey, Phil, you should watch this thing called The Old Guard." So I'm like, "Show me the preview to this movie," and I'm like, hell yes, I should watch this movie. So I just like sat on the couch, and I should have been doing some other stuff on Sunday, but I was like, I'm gonna watch this movie. I got zero regrets, man. The Old Guard. So I guess it was based on a graphic novel or a series or something. I didn't know that. Does not matter. It is fucking good. It is enjoyable. It has 2 amazing queer characters. It's got great action sequences, good good representation. Like it just hits. I can't say enough. If you have Netflix, you should just go watch it. You will not be disappointed. I enjoyed it immensely. I'm already planning to watch it with my dad. I haven't even told him yet, but little does he know he's going to be watching this with me. But I know once I show it to him, he's going to be like, "Oh hell, I'm all in."
Yep.
So I can't recommend it enough. And it was really kind of a nice little just respite on Sunday. I don't often sit and watch a whole movie, so I just like kicked back, put my feet up, I just hit the button on the iPad while I was like laying on the couch and just watched it and totally dug it. I'm actually looking forward to watching it again. I don't even want to tell you what it's about. Just go watch it.
Okay.
The Old Guard. Cool, Jared. Take us through.
All right. Well, first of all, I just got back from a 2-day acid cleaning, which also took me into another state briefly.
Did you get acid cleaned?
I did not get acid cleaned.
Okay.
I helped remove acid from a boiler. This had been a customer of ours years ago. We acid cleaned them when we took them over to clean up the system. We had them for a couple of years, and then they got bought out by a different company who canceled our contract and then didn't do anything for years. And then that company was bought by a third company, and one of the people there remembered us the first time and brought us back. But this was an emergency. They needed to have it done. Normally I have like a month or so to prepare for this and do all the measurements and analyze the scale and all that fun stuff. This was hi, it's Monday. We need this done by next Wednesday. You need to be done by Tuesday morning. And it's, halfway across the state from you. So it's not something that's going to leave. So you have to plan a day ahead of time. So that meant we had to come out on Sunday night to do this, to get prepared for it. And none of my usual staff could do it. So myself and my sales manager went out to do this. There's only certain people in our company are insured for it. So it was it was a fun thing. I mean, I've done this before. I've been doing it for 30 years. But it was nice that we had very nice weather. It wasn't 95-degree weather. It was high 70s, low 80s. We were on top of a hill in the Catskills, so we had a view for about 20 miles in every direction. The wind was blowing, but I also have not been outside all that much. So you can't tell by looking at me, but my face is seriously sun-baked, and I also spent, the better part of 2 days hauling drums of chemical around and hoses and all that. So I'm stiff as a board, but it felt good. It was nice. I haven't been on a physical job like this in a long time, and it was kind of nice. It was also a relaxing day because a lot of acid cleaning is standing around watching the pump. So that's part of it.
Does everybody else is everybody else like, oh boy, the boss is coming? Like,
no,
or are they like, yay, Jerry's coming?
Well, it depends. It was me and the other boss. So
yeah, okay.
So there were no, the rest of the staff can't come on these because the only other 2 people that are insured for this both have things going on this weekend.
Okay.
They were a little upset they couldn't come because these are also tend to be fairly lucrative when we have to do this kind of thing at the spur of the moment. But it's going to be nice. But what I did notice though was traveling. This is in a town that's not very large, but right across the border is a much larger city, and about 30,000 people. And traveling there, we kind of decided we're going to go into our hotel. We're going to come out and get some food and go back because ain't nobody, like half the people were not practicing any sort of safety whatsoever. It was, here we come up to a restaurant and there's a bunch of people waiting in line to get in, and there's 20 people in line without masks on, chatting with each other, and little kids running around, and actually I was at a facility where I start to walk in, I go to put my mask on, and I don't need to put your mask on here. We know better than that. If it kills a couple of us, it kills a couple of us. I'm like, I'm gonna turn around and go back in my car now. Goodbye.
I don't understand. So this is the thing that frustrates me, right?
Yeah.
Only a small percentage of people are going to die, right?
Doesn't matter.
But if you look at the rest of the numbers, like people are getting like fucked up with lung and heart problems and neurological problems. Like, it's not like a few people are going to die. Like, some of you aren't going to be able to walk upstairs without nearly passing out. And a large number of you compared to how many people are going to die. Yeah. Like,
I will also say that across the board, the people that were not wearing masks and were not being socially distant were across the board white people. Goddamn white people. Come on, man. Don't embarrass
mask
me
up.
like that.
Mask up, people.
So there was that. But other than that, first of all, if you are a fan of risque fantasy comics with a good humor, Ogloff is on Kickstarter right now for book 3. I don't know what's going to be in it, but book 2 had a really fun dungeon crawl adventure in the back of it. This is a online comic strip about a fantasy world. It is very not safe for work, but it's a lot of fun. So I jumped right on that one. Other than that, we're watching Elementary. I'm really enjoying. I'm up to season, I think, 4 or 5 now. So they've really kind of gotten past the stumbling blocks of season 1 and 2. It's a good series, but they made the typical season 2 problem of let's shake things up a little bit and realize, nope, that's not a good idea. Let's go back to what worked. And they've also introduced his girlfriend. Next Generation has been fun. These are all episodes I've never seen before, some of which very, very lots of bleed-in feels. If you have not watched last week's episodes, I would recommend it. I've been enjoying Stargirl, which has been on. It is. I'll say it. They understand how to do superhero shows. They have something superpowered happens every episode. They're playing a lot with how to take an existing set of characters and adapt them for modern day times and still have a good time with them. There's a lot of good Easter eggs in there. And the characters are, for the most part, believable. It doesn't have the problem that I often see in shows about teenagers, where the teenagers just act really stupid.
Yeah.
Not just, I mean, they're acting stupid for teenagers in a lot of these shows. And this one, they make some pretty good leaps of logic. It's a lot of fun. And of
It's
course,
a fun show.
Oh, it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun. If you enjoy superhero shows or shows about teenagers trying to come to terms with what it is to grow up, or Luke Wilson, you'll enjoy Stargirl. The special effects are very much TV special effects, but they're not embarrassingly bad, and that's good.
Yeah.
They're definitely TV special effects. They're not like Babylon 5 level of, it's a computer program, but it's a lot of fun. And lastly, I've been doing some Lego therapy. I dug up some more. I've just been, every week I dig out a set or two. And so I put together the supermarket. And I also found that Wegmans had at one point contracted with a knockoff Lego company to make a Wegmans truck.
Nice.
And I will say, I don't know if you guys can see this or not, it is.
Oh, yeah. I saw it.
Yeah. The truck is definitely, they stole the build from Lego. The parts are really, really crappy.
Oh, that's too bad.
They're not even as good as Mega Bloks. And so there was a lot of like trying to set. So it's nice. It's something I put together and I will never ever take it apart again, because there are some parts of this that just aren't gonna stay together.
Yeah.
If you take it apart, but it's nice to have a Lego, and the fact that I built a supermarket and have a Lego truck to go, and have a Wegmans truck to go with it. For those who aren't from upstate New York, Wegmans is our big supermarket chain up here that really have good quality food, and they're one of the top 50 companies in the country to work for, something like that.
Yeah.
Oh, Wegmans consistently.
Yeah. I mean, the stickers are fun, and the truck itself is neat. And it was still fun to build. I kind of built it sitting, watching Elementary. But yeah, as I put it down, 2 pieces fell off. So that's pretty something.
High quality Soviet-made Legos.
And the supermarket is fun in and of itself, because it's actually a set I already have. I ended up picking it up on sale somewhere. It's the first Lego Friends set I ever picked up. It's the one I picked up at Origins a couple of years ago. When I was after Origins, went to visit some customers and vendors, and was in the middle of nowhere, and they had a Lego set. Like, I'll just put this together, and made the mistake of buying one of the Lego Friends sets, and I was like, oh, this has a lot of really fun Gribblies in it, and that was it. So it's just been fun, but it's been fueling my gaming. So, all right,
awesome.
You want to move on to Patreon shoutouts?
Yeah, we got to get into the after show. So. Yeah. Patreon shoutouts. Nice coincidence that we looped around to the royal court again for the 400th episode. So here we go. Eileen Barnes, the Duchess of Pandas and Talking Games. Andrew Dacey, the Warden of Whiskies. Andy Olson, the Duke of Dice. Brian Kurtz, the Royal Doctor of Physic. Craig, the Lord of One Name. Eric Bonts, the Duke of Gators and the Lord of Beefness. GM, the Lord of the After Show.
That's me.
Jared Rasher. I don't know why it just says GM in there. I pulled that column, but anyhow. Jared Rasher, the Scribe of MMP. Jesse Edmond, the Royal Doctor. John C. What?
I said Doc.
Oh, yeah, Doc Palindrome.
Yep.
Jesse Edmond. John C. LeMay, the Guard at the End of the World. John Carney, Evil John, the Court Necromancer. Kevin Lovecraft, the Royal Beard. Mike Dinos, the Inquisitor of Mark, and his trusty sidekick Pretzel.
Mm-hmm.
Richard Wyatt, Captain of the Royal Airship Fleet. Schmitty, the Keeper of the Labyrinth. Tiberius Starcrash Smith, one of the best names in the biz, the Baron of Britannia. And Todd Crapper, the Prophet of Probability.
Talk about best names.
Yeah. Thank you all for being our patrons, and thanks to everyone for listening tonight.
If you are free on Tuesday evenings at 8 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. the Queen's Time, come join us live on Twitch, where you can chat with other awesome listeners in the awesome chat room for life and ask us some awesome questions. See how many times I used awesome?
See what you did there.
Did that. And if you cannot make it to the live show, you can check out our podcast each week, wherever you get your podcasts. Take a listen to some of our other shows in the Misdirected Mark Network, such as Down with D&D, Bone, Stone, and Obsidian, the FM Gamers, Pandas Talking Games, the Gnomecast, Jane Who Hustle, any nominated She's a Super Geek, and Bonus Experience. You can and should also check out our sibling podcasts, Tabletop Bellhop, The Knights of the Night, and the always amazing Gaming and BS.
Indeed, indeed. After you have built a chunk of your world, but before you knock off page 30 of your world building, leave us some feedback. Hit us up on the old-fashioned emails, mmp@misdirectedmark.com. You can check us out on Twitter. The show and the network is @misdirectedmark. He's Robert M. Everson. He's GM Gerrymander, and I am DNA Phil.
If you like what we do here and on the other shows in the Misdirected Mark word scramble in the Misdirected Mark network, you can support our Patreon campaigns. MMP, Down with D&D, and Panda Stocking Games are at patreon.com/MMP. She's a Super Geek is at patreon.com/SassGeek. Zhengu Hustle is at patreon.com/Zhengu Hustle. And Bonus Experience is at patreon.com/Bonus Experience. Patrons of MMP, Down with D&D, Panda Stocking Games get access to the after show, pre-production show notes, musical parodies, the Panda Stocking Games bonus outtakes, and other special releases.
This has been a Misdirected Mark production, the media arm of Encoded Designs. Mic drop!
Be out!